the right speed control for your airplane, it's not too hard to do. The main thing you need to look at is the maximum continuous current rating, and a lot of manufacturers would actually quote the burst current rating. Like this one is called, they call it a 40 amp speed control, but if you look at the label, it actually has a 35 in much bigger letters, because the 35 is the continuous and 40 amp is the burst. And you know, the burst is handy when you're taking off, but if you're a beginner, I will just ignore that and just look at this as a maximum 35 amp speed control. And you know, you can always use a speed control that has a higher current rating than what you need, but of course then it's going to cost more and it's going to weigh more. So just try and get close to what you need, maybe a little bit more, but don't go too much higher, because it's just wasted money and weight. The other part of the speed control is a voltage regulator, because they're also used to supply voltage to the rest of the flight pack, like the servos and the receiver, and that's really handy. Unless the speed control tells you specifically that it has a so-called switching voltage regulator, you have to assume that it's a linear voltage regulator, and linear voltage regulators do not use more than like a full 4-cell battery pack, because they're just very inefficient when you get higher than that, and they don't work at all. So like this one, it doesn't say it, so you have to assume that it's linear. But like this other one here is a much more expensive speed control from Yeti, and it actually says, you know, switching regulator. So I know that you know, it's got a really good voltage regulator, and it's good for up to 6 cells. Okay, but this is the exception. Okay, some of them are called opto or optically isolated speed controls, like this one, and what that means is that it has no voltage regulator at all. So you need to be using a separate battery, like a receiver battery pack, to supply the voltage to the receiver, to the servos, and to the electronics in the speed control. And they normally only do this for high capacity speed controls, like this one is rated for up to 6 cells. And so, you know, so they couldn't use a linear one, and they didn't want to put in a switching regulator because it's more expensive, so they just left it out. And speed controls can get really hot, especially if you're pushing it close to its limit, so make sure that it gets plenty of air. I will keep it away from the receiver, because it can mess up the receiver with all that heat. All speed controls can be programmed to change the settings, but the truth is, if you're just starting out and you're just doing like a 3-cell airplane, I think it's very unlikely that you will need to change the default settings on it. And if you do, you know, you can do it using the transmitter. I usually just go nuts when I try and do that. So you're much better off getting a programming card like this one. It just makes it so much easier to program the speed control. But again, you don't need to be messing with it, and especially if you change the timing, because there's a big temptation to change the timing settings because you're trying to get more performance out of it. If you change the timing settings, measure the RPM before and after, because you can easily make it worse. And if you make it worse, it's going to be a lot more heat on the motor, and it's just not good of it all. So anyway, keep it simple, keep it light, you know, do the proper sizing on the speed control, and have fun, and see you next time.